At our family barbecue, my brother made cruel jokes about his wife. She stunned everyone by admitting an affair and leaving him. His life fell apart and a terrible decision landed him in jail. So, my brother David, who's 32, and his wife Sarah, who's 29, have been married for about 6 years now. David has always thought he's hilarious, but really, he's just plain mean. Yesterday, at our family barbecue, things went completely off the rails. To give you some background, Sarah has been through a really tough time trying to get pregnant. She's had 2 heartbreaking miscarriages over the past 4 years. But finally, about 7 months ago, she got pregnant and made it past the point where she'd lost the other pregnancies. We were all trying to be optimistic and super excited for her and David. Now, David has this terrible habit of making so-called jokes, which are just nasty comments disguised as humor, especially about Sarah. Yesterday was supposed to be a party to celebrate because Sarah's due in about 6 weeks. We were all hanging out in the backyard having a good time. David, on the other hand, had been downing beers all afternoon and started with his usual inappropriate comments. At first, it was kind of subtle. He made a comment about how Sarah was finally doing her wifely duty, and how he was happy his investment was paying off. Sarah looked pretty uncomfortable, but she didn't say anything because if she argues with David, he just gets worse. The rest of us, my parents, my aunt and uncle, and my cousin, kind of just awkwardly chuckled it off like we always do, Sia. Because calling David out never ends well. But then it got worse as he kept drinking. He started making cruel jabs about how Sarah better not mess it up like before, and made some horrible comment about how he was going to make sure she didn't do anything stupid. Sarah turned ghost-eyed, her hands were shaking, but she just excused herself to go to the bathroom instead of causing a scene. When Sarah came back, David was chatting to my dad about how he's going to raise his son to be tough and not weak like Sarah's family. As Sarah sat down, David hit her with a jaw-dropping comment. He actually wondered aloud if she got pregnant by someone else because he would have let any guy sleep with her just to get an heir. The whole table went dead silent, and Sarah just stared at him with a look I had never seen before. My dad tried to say something, but Sarah put up her hand, stood up, and then it all blew up. She looked straight at David and said, "You want the truth, David? You're right. This baby isn't yours. I've been having an affair for the past 8 months with someone who treats me like a person, not just a broken incubator. I'm done pretending this marriage can be saved. I'm done with you treating me like garbage. I'm leaving, and I'm keeping this baby away from you." Then she turned to the rest of us and apologized that we had to see that, but she just couldn't take it anymore. And with that, she walked out, got into her car, and drove off. David just sat there, completely stunned. He started screaming for someone to go after her, insisting she was lying and just trying to hurt him. But none of us moved because we were all too shocked to even process what had just happened. Eventually, he ordered an Uber, and the rest of us just sat there in silence for 20 minutes before deciding to head home ourselves. Now David's crashing at my place because Sarah changed the locks on their house and won't pick up his calls or messages. He's been begging me to call her and convince her to come back, insisting she was just mad and didn't mean it about the affair. Honestly, I don't know if I even want to help him. I love my brother and have always tried to support him, but the way he treats Sarah has always been tough to watch. Part of me thinks Sarah finally had enough and fought back in the only way she knew would hit him just as hard. David keeps dismissing it as Sarah being dramatic and insists that married couples are supposed to be able to chuck around jokes. But what he did wasn't joking. It was intentionally cruel and meant to humiliate her in front of us all. I'm torn because David's my brother, and he's clearly devastated, but I can't shake the image of Sarah's face when she finally snapped. It was like watching someone who's been holding their breath underwater finally come up gasping for air. I'm stuck not knowing whether I should help David try to win Sarah back or just stay out of this mess entirely. By the way, I've gotten a lot of questions about my previous post, so let me clear some things up and give you more context about David and Sarah. First off, our family doesn't bully or mistreat Sarah. This is all about David's behavior towards her. We've always liked Sarah, included her in family stuff, and my parents have been kind to her. My cousin gets along with her, and I've always thought of her as a friend. The problem is how David treats her, and even though we've all seen it over the years, we haven't really been able to stop it effectively. I realize now I didn't provide enough examples of David's behavior in the first post. This isn't just a one-time thing. David treats Sarah like this on the regular, and it's gotten worse over time. David hasn't had a job for 3 years, and Sarah, who's a nurse practitioner, has been the one supporting them. Despite this, David calls Sarah a gold digger in front of people and jokes about how she's lucky to have him taking care of her. If anyone points out that Sarah is the one working and paying the bills, David just laughs it off, claiming she wouldn't be able to afford their lifestyle without him, which doesn't even make sense. After Sarah's first miscarriage, David started making awful jokes about her being defective and broken, and those hurtful comments have continued throughout her fertility struggles. At family dinners, he'll say things like how Sarah can't do the one thing women are supposed to be good at, and that he's starting to think he picked the wrong horse. When Sarah gets upset, David tells her she's being too sensitive and that he's just trying to lighten the mood in a tough time. David treats Sarah more like an employee than a wife, giving her lists of household chores and getting mad if she doesn't do them exactly as he wants. He tells her that since she's the one working, she should also handle all the household stuff because that's how partnerships work. When Sarah tries to explain she's exhausted from long shifts at the hospital, David tells her plenty of women manage to work and keep house, so she must just be bad at time management. The way David talks to Sarah in public is embarrassing. He interrupts her, corrects her in front of others, and dismisses her opinions, even when she knows more about a topic than he does. When she tries to talk about her work or current events, David makes snide comments like, "Sarah thinks she knows everything," or "Here comes Dr. Sarah with another lecture," which has trained her to keep quiet in group conversations. David also has this weird habit of testing Sarah's commitment to their marriage by making unreasonable demands and getting angry when she resists. He's told her that if she really loved him, she'd quit her job so they could focus on having kids, even though they need her income to survive. He's also told her to cut contact with her friends because married women shouldn't need friends outside their marriage, and her closeness with her sister makes him feel like she doesn't prioritize their marriage. The pregnancy comments are especially cruel because David knows how much Sarah's fertility struggles have affected her emotionally. After her second miscarriage, David told people at a family gathering that Sarah keeps killing his children and that he was starting to wonder if God was trying to tell them something. When Sarah started crying and left the room, David brushed it off by saying she was being dramatic and needed to toughen up. So that's the whole messy saga. I'm just trying to figure out what's the right thing to do here. So, here's the deal with David and Sarah. Things have been super tense during Sarah's pregnancy. David's been making these so-called jokes about how he's got to babysit Sarah to make sure she doesn't mess things up. He's even talked about hiring someone to keep tabs on her. Plus, he's telling people he's not getting his hopes up because Sarah's let him down before. Pretty harsh considering she's had multiple pregnancy losses. I love my brother though, and I've tried to talk to him about this stuff, but David just doesn't see what he's doing wrong. Every time I call him out, he says I'm blowing things out of proportion and claims Sarah knows he's joking. Our whole family has tried to talk sense into him, but he just gets mad and accuses us of siding with Sarah. It's crazy because Sarah's never badmouthed him to us. She's always stuck up for him. Things hit a boiling point when Sarah announced at a family barbecue that she's been having an affair. I wasn't too shocked. She's been under a ton of pressure. I don't support what she did, but I get why she felt trapped. Now, David's crashing at my place, insisting she'll come around and wants me to talk to her. But honestly, maybe he needs to face the mess he's made himself. So, after a couple of weeks of David pestering me, I finally agreed to meet up with Sarah. I was kind of surprised she wanted to talk. We met up somewhere neutral, and she seemed really worn out. She apologized for the scene at the barbecue but said she couldn't keep living a lie. She explained she'd been seeing someone else for about 8 months. It started as just friendship, but then it became more because this new guy actually respects her. Sarah's clear that her marriage to David is done. She's been trying for years to be the wife he wanted, but realized all he wants is control. She even mentioned David's been bombarding her with texts and showing up uninvited, and she's thinking about getting a restraining order. Talking to her made me realize how serious she is about moving on. David's convinced he can fix things if he talks to her, but honestly, I doubt that's going to happen. I'm torn because I want to help David, but I don't want to make things worse. I think he needs to accept that it's over and start figuring out his next steps, but he's just not there yet. It's been a few more weeks since then, and honestly, things have only gotten messier. I'm really not sure how to handle it anymore. I told David about my talk with Sarah and made it clear that she wasn't budging on the divorce. David totally lost it and moved out of my place in the middle of the night without even telling me where he was going. The next day, I found out he had checked into some cheap motel, spending his days drinking at random bars and trying to get intel about Sarah from mutual friends. Sarah had moved in with her sister and wasn't sharing her location because David kept popping up where he thought she might be, which was seriously freaking her out. About a week after David left, I got a call from a bartender asking me to come pick him up because he'd gotten into a fight and was too drunk to drive. When I got there, David was outside the bar with a black eye and a cut lip, super drunk, barely able to stand. The bartender said David had been loudly complaining about his wife cheating and got aggressive when someone told him to pipe down. This turned into a pattern over the next few weeks. I kept getting calls to pick David up from different places because he was either causing a scene or too wasted to get home. David was never much of a drinker, so seeing him drunk every day was alarming. He obviously wasn't eating well or taking care of himself. The worst part went down 2 weeks ago when David got into another fight at a bar and ended up arrested for assault. He punched a guy who made a comment about his situation and broke the dude's nose. I had to use my savings to bail him out, and when I picked him up, he showed no remorse, saying the guy deserved it. Around the same time, David developed a gambling problem out of nowhere. He started hitting up a casino about an hour away, disappearing for whole days, and coming back broke, begging me for money for food and gas. When I asked why he was gambling when he was flat broke, he said he was trying to win enough to hire a private investigator to prove Sarah was lying. David got more demanding for cash and would get mad when I refused. He even showed up at my job asking for money, which was super embarrassing. When I told him to stop, he accused me of deserting him during his worst time. Last week, my parents and I decided to stage an intervention because his behavior was spinning out of control. We invited him over for dinner to talk about getting professional help, but David flipped out, accusing us of thinking he was crazy. He said the only problem was Sarah betraying him and that everything would be fine if she came back. When my dad mentioned that Sarah wasn't coming back, David started yelling, threw a plate at the wall, and stormed out. He didn't answer his phone for 3 days, which freaked us out because he'd been making comments about having nothing left to live for. We were scared he might hurt himself, so my dad checked the motel, found out David had skipped without paying, and no one knew where he went. David finally called me yesterday from another, even further motel. He sounded totally defeated and just kept saying he didn't understand how everything got so screwed up. He asked if I thought Sarah would ever forgive him, and when I was honest and said no, he started crying, which I've never heard him do. I'm at a loss. I don't know how to help David because he won't face the fact that his actions drove Sarah away. He refuses therapy and just keeps asking me to contact Sarah or help him win her back. When I say no, he gets mad and says, I don't care. I love my brother and want to support him, but I'm realizing I can't fix this for him, and trying might just be enabling him. I'm thinking of stepping back until he's ready to help himself, but I'm scared about what could happen if everyone stops helping. This whole thing is draining me emotionally, affecting my own mental health and my relationship with my boyfriend, who's been patient but is getting frustrated with how much time I'm spending on David's issues. I know I need to set boundaries, but don't want to feel like I'm abandoning him when he needs help the most. Update. I can't believe I'm even writing this, but David got arrested for trying to kidnap Sarah's newborn from the hospital. This is beyond anything I imagined. Sarah had her baby girl 3 days ago, and somehow David found out through someone at her work who didn't know he wasn't supposed to know. Sarah had asked to keep the birth and her location a secret, but David found out anyway. Yesterday, he showed up at the hospital in scrubs, claiming to be Sarah's brother visiting his niece. The hospital staff didn't question it since he knew Sarah's name and the baby's birth date. He went to Sarah's room while she was sleeping, picked up the baby, and started heading for the elevator. A nurse got suspicious when he said he was taking the baby for tests and wasn't on the list to do that. Security came just as he tried getting on the elevator with the baby, and David completely lost it, screaming that the baby was his and accusing Sarah of stealing his life. They had to physically restrain him. The police were called, and David got arrested for attempted kidnapping, trespassing, and harassment since there was a restraining order against him that we didn't know about. The police asked me to come down because David was asking for me, and they wanted to verify some things about his mental state. Seeing him in the holding cell, he looked like a different person. He'd lost a ton of weight, and his hair was a mess. David kept insisting he hadn't done anything wrong and just wanted to see his daughter, even though everyone had told him the baby wasn't his. So, here's the lowdown. David kept insisting that he had rights to the baby because he was married to Sarah when she got pregnant, even though a DNA test said otherwise. He believed Sarah had somehow brainwashed everyone against him. The cops told me Sarah was really shaken up by everything that went down, so they moved her to a safer room in the hospital. Thankfully, the baby was okay, but David's erratic and aggressive behavior made them worry about what could have happened if he'd managed to leave with her. I asked about the charges against David, and the officer said he was looking at serious jail time for attempted kidnapping and other charges due to his history of harassment. I tried talking to David at the police station for about an hour. It was like talking to a stranger, not the brother I grew up with. He was all over the place, angry, defensive, then crying about missing Sarah and feeling empty without her. When I asked him what his big plan was if he had made it out of the hospital with the baby, he said he planned to take her somewhere safe where Sarah couldn't find them, thinking she would eventually come back to him. It was clear he wasn't thinking straight, believing that kidnapping a baby would somehow fix everything. I called my parents after leaving the station, and they were just as shocked and horrified as I was. Dad wanted to find a lawyer to help David, but Mom argued that maybe jail time would finally make David face the consequences of his actions. I've been thinking about this nonstop since it happened. David could have seriously hurt the baby and traumatized Sarah even more after all she's been through. The worst part is, David still doesn't get that what he did was wrong. He's still blaming Sarah instead of taking responsibility. I'm starting to think David really needs professional help, and this is more than our family can handle alone. Fast forward 4 months after David's arrest. The court finally sentenced him to 18 months for attempted kidnapping, trespassing, and breaking a restraining order. His lawyer tried to get a lighter sentence due to David's mental state and clean record, but the judge wasn't having it, pointing out the risk to the baby and David's pattern of harassment. During the hearing, I hoped David might finally admit he messed up, but nope. He kept blaming Sarah, saying he was the victim because she betrayed him. He claimed he never meant to hurt the baby, just wanted time with his daughter, despite knowing she wasn't his biologically. The judge wasn't impressed, noting David's lack of remorse and understanding of his actions. Sarah also spoke during the hearing, looking strong and composed. She explained how David's harassment began long before the hospital incident and how terrifying his attempt to take the baby was for her. She shared how his emotional abuse had affected her mental health and made it hard for her to move on. She asked the judge to give David a sentence that would protect her and help him get the help he needed. After the sentencing, her lawyer said Sarah had decided to move away with her daughter and the baby's real father to start fresh somewhere David couldn't find them. She got a new job at a hospital in another state, which seemed like the safest choice. I talked to Sarah after court to apologize for everything David put her through. She was gracious, saying she didn't hold the rest of us accountable and appreciated our kindness. She told me she named her daughter Luna, who's happy and healthy in a loving environment. Although sad about how things turned out, Sarah felt relief knowing Luna wouldn't be exposed to David's toxic behavior. I asked, Daid, if we could keep in touch, but she felt it was better to make a clean break from anything related to David for her and Luna's safety. My parents and I visited David in jail a bit later, and he was still claiming everyone overreacted and accused Sarah of being vindictive for leaving. He didn't get how his actions led to this. I've started seeing a therapist to help me process everything and realize my role in enabling David over the years. By always making excuses for him, I stopped him from facing the consequences of his actions. I decided I wouldn't enable him anymore. David is an adult who made his bed, and if he wants to have healthy relationships, he needs to learn to take responsibility for his mistakes. As for Sarah and little Luna, I really hope they're happy and safe in their new life, free from David's harassment. Sarah deserves so much more than what she went through, and I'm glad she found the courage to leave and build a better life for herself and her daughter.